how do we, as Christians or as people located in Ekasi, how do we then make this a reality? And so I would want us to engage with the professor, and maybe if we have some questions, let's raise those questions, because I think this will be really rich. But I feel like there's still a lot more missing that we want to get from him before the day ends. And so I don't know if there's anybody, Ekasi, do you want to lead us with a question to the professor?
What, in your legal view, are the shortcomings of a black theology?
Black theology and the women, and is how obviously a part of it comes out of the culture, our black culture, and as well as the propagators of the gospel and how they branded it, and the male-female dynamics in those cultures, and the wonderful first chapter of Genesis where man was created first, and the great spots in the New Testament when Paul says women shall not speak. Maybe you have that. Thank you.
There's no other Henry Fudge except this. So I think if we have not reached a point, we are coming to a point in which there's a question to you. Will we be correct if we are to say, if Jesus Christ does not return as a liberator of black people, we ought to put the vote of no confidence?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And perhaps, as a hypothesis, we'll then arrive at a point that we'll say that the God of the Bible is captured for us. So that is my question to you.
Black theology of liberation is a self-critical discourse on the faith of the oppressed. Forever self-critical. The first thing. I use the word, let us not romanticize. Exactly because we recognize in black theology that if you are too romantic about the things that are in the past, and even the violence that has become part of our culture, and you become an essentialist, then you miss the point. All scholars of black theology, humanists, and so forth, will start from a point of self-critique. The fact that we say black on its own is a modest attempt at saying, look, I have never heard anybody say a Calvin is a white Swiss theologian. I've never anyone say Hegel is a German. They say Hegel in all countries of the world is the father of history. Now to say black is to immediately say my location immediately makes my reflection to be limited. You are expressing limitation. You are also expressing the spaces that are particular, and you do that out of humility. Blackness is also not about the color of the skin. It is not pigmentocracy. And one of the layers that is constantly created in making people to think race when we say black is because of the layers and layers and layers that are created to respond in defense of white privilege, to see a person who says I'm black as a person who is against the white. No, it is a starting point. I start from home. I start from the conditions of the crucifixion of black people. The largest number of black people in Latin America is the second largest number after Nigeria. but you will never see a black person in Porto Alegre in Brazil. The condition of blackness is a starting point. It is not the end, ultimately. So I want first to deal with these layers that continue to make us imagine black theology in a particular way. But you are correct. I agree with you. There are many failures that we have, and I'm going to talk about my failures. I'm afraid I don't want to talk about other people's failures. During the Fees Must Fall at the University of Pretoria, I was in a building of this size with black students that were throttled. And I came in that meeting that evening, casual, with my nice sandals, and I'm using those words deliberately because this young girl, almost the age of my last born, was pointing at me like this. You keep on coming here with nice sandals, asking us about how do we do. You black conscious people, where were you 23 years ago? Were you part of this project that has deceived us? We are throttled at the university. We are taken out of the university. You come with your bangs. You come and tell us from privilege. You come and say you are in solidarity with us. You write statements. What type of solidarity is this on WhatsApp? In media. We are living outside campus. The university has expelled us. That day I began to remember and to count how many black theologians were vice rectors. I don't want to become one. I began, how many black theologians were this and that? And where are they? Now, yes, what is the deep weakness about black theology and black consciousness? I don't have an answer, but I am seeing something about too much of intellectual emphasis on black consciousness than the balance of black consciousness with spirituality. Our inability to translate the promises of black consciousness into reality is a spiritual matter. And most people who are writing on black consciousness do not write black consciousness, black theology, without looking at the area of spirituality. Let me tell you, Sasso, out of which black consciousness was born, Sasso, all the women and men who were on trial are the ones who said Jesus Christ is the liberator. Not black consciousness first. Yeah? So the fact that we have de-linked our courage from spirituality and we think we are going to intellectualize black consciousness is a problem in South Africa. And I think it's a problem we really must deal with. Black consciousness is also a spiritual matter. So those are the things, the ideas that are developing in my interpretation of black consciousness, particularly its relationship with our intellectual traditions and our ability to translate them. We need the energy, the spiritual energy to do so. Now, a black consciousness, a black conscious male cannot be a patriarch. I confess, yeah, as a man from Transkei, you see. But a black conscious person male cannot be a patriarch.
Amen to that.
Yes.
But the issue is we need spiritual energy to deal with the ruthlessness of a patriarchal system that was imposed on us. It is patriarchal, it is racist, it is sexist, it is chauvinistic, and all of it is designed to make a black person to serve a white person. So there is no patriarchy that can ever be supported by any person who is black conscious. So there's no black theology, therefore, that supports patriarchy. The very first writings of black theology debunk patriarchy. The very first collection of black theology talks about the evil of the patriarchal violence against women. So, even as I say to you, when you look at the history of the development of black consciousness itself, as particularly the side of the spirituality, in my paper yesterday, my first thing was to say, let us affirm Nongauze as a heroine rather than a villain. Because if you look at her story and the violence of the colonizer, she was 12 years, it was statutory rape against a girl. Now, then you create a location that must be a breeding, a pot of all these contradictions. That's where males will be so angry and destroy women in the shacks. That's why they will ban each other. A black conscious man cannot keep on having children in the street, because the spirituality of a black conscious man is to know that a child is an important gift from God. We don't romanticize these things. Yes. So yes, there's no black consciousness. Even the Bible, when you read it from the perspective of black consciousness and black theology, womanist theologians, there's one also among us here. She can speak to you more than I can do about it. We have got, mothers, even in the United States and so forth. And in actual fact, black consciousness and black theology challenge the imaginary of the Bible as the starting point of life. Because the Bible tells a story within a particular scope of time. Before 5,000 years or so of the biblical story, there were black people. And they had their story. They had their wisdom. So the writers of black theology, African theology, will argue that don't read Paul like that. In actual fact, it is not even Christianity, let me say that point quickly. It is a particular reading of Paul with a particular ideological perspective that continues to read Paul like that to make us the seven in Ekasi. Because you remember that my mother must go and wash the underwear of the master in Sanctum and come back and be a wife here. My sister must do the same thing. That's not the Bible. It's a particular interpretation of the Bible that continues to make us to be like that. I believe that Jesus Christ is here, even now as we speak. To think of Jesus Christ as coming, yeah, that's fine, but I'm not part of that. I believe that Jesus Christ is here already in this conversation today. And I believe that Jesus Christ was there when my mother, with nothing in a township, was able to do something for me. You see, how you understand time is another layer we must debunk. Jesus is here, and with Jesus we are going to win. My thinking is that when he comes again, there will be no racist in South Africa. That's my vision. The other way around. I understand that your question is metaphorical. It is not necessarily literalistic. So the hope that I see every day when I'm in the township, and the prayer of a person who comes to church without having driven a car, and the prayer of a person who comes to church having driven a car are different. When a child who grew up in Gippsland says, Jesus is my Savior, that child is not the same as a child who says, Jesus is my Savior in something. Not the same. And hope is not utopia. It's not ideology. Hope is the denial of the killing effects of colonialism, and the life in Ekasi is a denial. And in that denial, I see Jesus. That's why I'm saying I see Jesus now. If there are people who are constantly working against the killing forces of racism, neoliberal economics today, that's where I see Jesus. A little bit in these spaces. When we worship Jesus. I'm not sure if this response is too philosophical. But remember that Jesus is now. Resurrection is now. It's not the coming. That kind of thinking is exactly one among many others we must peel off in our imagining of Christian faith.
So my question is, why do we need that in the end, Jesus loves you, God still saves? I mean, even in response to the question about the initial, founders of SASU were saying Jesus is the liberator. Why do we need to pepper it with? Why is it not enough to just say, rely on yourself as a black person? You are going to save yourself. No one is going to do this for you without having to. And secondary to that question is the whole notion of what do we mean by spirituality? Is it a spirituality that is appealing only to the white gaze? Is it in us saying, because Jesus loves you, or because God loves you, now we have framed it within the context of spirituality? Or can we speak about spirituality in any other form and still be considered valid spirituality?
And it is the church that teaches us that women submit to your own husbands. It is the church that teaches us that sometimes store up riches in heaven and forget about what the situation is on earth. What becomes the role of black theology in that? How does it empower us to begin to peel off these layers? Because I might be sitting here now, listening to you, saying all these liberating things, but on Sunday I'm going to go to my church and I'm going to be taught to submit, to serve with diligence my masters on earth. Because I have a master in heaven, we are all servants of the same master. Now I must serve and please my Lord Jesus, who wants me to serve my white master on earth. What becomes the role of black theology in empowering me in such spaces, in expressing my spirituality, but at the same time challenging these walls that close me in?
Speak about resurrection, and before resurrection we talk about death first, resurrection, and then the ascension. So we are in a spiritual space where there are very combative forces that we are faced with. We are dealing with the concept of black theology, but we are also faced with this monster, which we understand as the Illuminati. How does that feature within black
theology and black consciousness and our identity, and how do we arm ourselves in combating this monster, spiritual monster?
And now we have a place of congestion. No civilization that I can think about that has studied humanity will deny spirituality or religious consciousness as something intrinsically human, unless you have one. I'm trying to think in Asia, I'm trying to think in the West. In fact, the scholars of modernity who have also spoken a lot about secularization and so on, all of them, including Karl Marx, do not deny that a human being intrinsically has an element of spirituality. So that's the first in trying to respond to your question. So there's a sense in which spirituality precedes religion. There's a sense in which, because it is part of our human nature, it is gifted. It is something that whether you believe or not, firstly you can't deny, but it might also suggest that there is a hand that gives you, as a human being, this capital. Like you have material capital, you also have spiritual capital as a human being. The dimensions of a human being holistically suggest that spirituality is part of us. It's part of us. Now, because of that, if my thesis is correct, because of that, I think that rather than understand the confusion sources of spirituality, I must understand mine first as a black African person. So where are they? They are in our land. That's why in African philosophy, not theology, that's why we say we use that. Feminists have a problem with that, but we say motherland. In other words, the land on which we live is a womb. It generates the spirituality we require to live. Land is therefore one of the most important things that is anchoring. It anchors our spirituality. So when you take land from a black person, the dispossession of land is also not only the dispossession of the economic, the material, it is also the dispossession and the destruction of the spiritual gifting of a black person. Mm-hmm. So as a black person, I have been to the DRC and so forth. I have seen the crawl. where we keep cattle in and so forth and so on. The dung carpet, we believe, warms the living departed. That is a form of spirituality. It's not utopian. It is to know that in life there are certain things you can never be certain about without making a plea for them. It's another resource of our spirituality. So I can name them and list these resources, the myths in which we believe. The myths that, because there is no philosophy that develops without a myth first. You know, Hegel never traveled more than 10 kilometers away from home, but they say he's a world philosopher. And we're meant to be this. So it's even better to think of my grandfather who traveled from Joburg to Kumbu as a better philosopher. Because Hegel did not even go more than 10 kilometers away from this. He was, so our myths, our stories, the stories that shape our ethics, that shape our aesthetics, and so forth. Yes, you can take them from Europe, but I'm saying the starting point is which are yours as a black African person. What is it that informs and nurtures your spirituality? If spirituality is something that is given to all of us as human beings. So our African religiosity as a whole becomes a repository, a fountain of the spirituality that must build our consciousness. So, because of that, I then say, what is a spirituality? All right, let me deepen it a little bit. What is spirituality? What packages this thing we call spirituality? To me, I will use two well-known concepts to define spirituality. It is ideology first, reason. Combine that with faith. And faith in its crudest sense, faith as power, not faith as Christianity. No. Faith as something that ultimately translates into energy, into power. Now, when your ideology is not compatible with your faith, then you are a spiritual disaster. Now, that's exactly what colonization does. The coloniality of a human being at the moment is such that the attack is on spirituality. Your reason, and reason is, do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Are you a man? Are you LGBTI? Are you both? Are you a woman? Do you know who you are? Who are you? It's reason. And you will develop the ideology, the ideas of who you are. But to live who you are requires faith. I always said, when I was still young, I would say to my wife, I had students in my office, so that's why I'm here at 10 o'clock. And she would look at me, she would say, I don't believe you. Now, when she says that, the language and the rationality is something else. When she says, I don't believe you, then I must think about my confession of faith in our bedroom liturgy. To try and make her believe.
Yes, yes.
Because there's just no other thing. You have got to make this other person to believe. I'm not sure if I am pushing it too far, but the combination of ideology and faith, once there is no balance, the spirituality suffers. And that's exactly the reason why Christianity today, that preaches with a rationality that is not compatible, a faith, or rather, that is not compatible with our rationality, continues to produce what I call human drones. A person with an imbalanced spirituality is worse than a bomb that the Americans can create. If you want to look at the power of religion, and I'm not saying this in any pejorative sense, not saying it in any pejorative sense, for a person to put on bombs around his body or her body as a result of his or her faith, that's the power of religion. And the manufacture of religion in the histories of humanity is designed exactly to attain that, the level of optimal control of a human being. And what do you do to achieve that? You've got to create a rupture between thinking and believing. Now, thinking and believing, remember, are the cornerstones that have been used, in colonization. Sometimes you are so convinced, but you are ruthlessly disbelieving. That's the problem. You believe too much, but your belief is senseless. So you drive these two things in the 21st century, and you achieve what you like. Let me prove what I'm saying. The book by Francis Fukuyama that declares that history has come to an end, the book, the end of history, is based on the metaphysics of the soul. Francis Fukuyama argues that to drive capitalism, we've got to rupture the ability of a person to make a distinction between need and want. That's why packaging and advertisement and so forth are the drivers of news today. You continue to yearn for something, even if your mind tells you that you cannot get it. Right? You look at it ethically. Our inability to even deal with issues of self-control. I mean, look in the township today. How is it going to be justified by anybody that a man would rape a person because this person must be straight? Why would you rape a person because you want them to be straight? Straight, and I've never seen a male organ that is straight. But you want to make a person straight by raping them. All I'm saying is that you've got to look at the irrationality. And I'm continuing with the thesis that I started. Spirituality is the combination of two powerful things in the world, ideology and faith. And faithlessness is also dangerous, because philosophers who were faithless are the ones who started the Holocaust in Germany. So to think, to be like our president said, if you are clever blacks, don't forget spirituality. You've got the combination of the two. And I think in one sense, I'm responding to your question, ma'am. The creation of a religion that makes women on Sunday to accept that they are less than men is an ideological discourse driven or couched in faith. It is not the gospel of Jesus. I can stand everywhere to argue against that. I doubt that if we do not make people to see it, we will be able to deal with it. Universities produce pastors that are going to preach it like that. Universities teach students to know that Calvert, Calvin, Pannenberg, all of them, those are the standard people that must be known in teaching theology. So what do? You produce the tools that will continue to reproduce and to sustain. Exactly. Now, those are the layers that sometimes create the contradictions that you see in the township. So this kind of a conversation is helpful in the sense that it probably is a good starting point. And remember, another weakness for us is that the moment, because this is the strategy of the powerful, the moment they identify you, that's Black Theology of Liberation. The moment they kill you. Remember, Steve Biko was killed. You must remember that. The powerful know the different types of blacks they are dealing with. They are happy with more than 70% of black people who accept their condition. And it is easy for them to identify those who say, stand up. And then what do? If they can't quarantine, they kill. You've got to remember that. And Christianity is exactly about that. That's why spiritually, I'm going back again. That's why spiritually, you've got to understand that Christianity is a faith of the powerless. Christianity is not a faith of the powerful. Once it becomes the faith of the powerful, it is Nietzschean. It is Nietzsche. It is the will of the powerful. The reason why we emphasize the marginalized, the poor, it is because Christian faith is the faith of the powerless. In other words, we have got to affirm the powerless, not the powerful. That is why I see it in informal settlements. That's why I see it where people are hungry. That's where the energy of my spirituality derives. I'm not saying I'm excluding anybody, but I'm saying Christianity is a faith of the powerless. And if we don't keep it that way, then our ideology, it becomes more powerful than faith. Another image, if I go back to the cross that I used as a metaphor for a conversation, if you live above the cross, in the name of Jesus, you are a king. Always live below the cross. That combination is essential. Black students have critiqued Christianity, have critiqued colonization, I agree. But without spirituality, black consciousness again becomes useless. So the combination of these two things is important. And what are the spiritual tools for a black person? Let's identify them. Aesthetics, umbatana, the dress of a woman, the shouting in the shebeens. They shout. Even in the buses, if you are in a plane that has got black people, they are not going to whisper. They shout. Have you heard? I was in a taxi one day, alone as a maid, with women. It was very unfortunate. This guy was drinking something, and he said for the first time, "Hey, try. Stop. Let's stop because I want to pass water and so on." He did it for the second time. This women, and then when he said, "Try," all women at the same time. At the same time, 15 of them. Then, and they said everything until we arrived in Ghana. The only thing that these males know is to pass water. That's all they know. When are we going to arrive at home? And so forth and so on. All I'm saying is that, brothers, I'm trying to say your questions are difficult. I'm grappling with them. Is there anything good that can come out of Christianity? Unfortunately, I was baptized. Unfortunately. And I think even most of you were. And to deny that is also a philosophical lie. So, liberation will never be authentic if one does not deal with that reality. That's why other scholars have said maybe Christianity is witchcraft for me. Maybe Christianity is something highfalutin and so on. But most of us were baptized. Can we find something in this faith that is useful for us? Yes, we did. The ANC were not here when Christianity with Alan Gusak and Desmond Tutu was filling the space. There were no MK cadres here. They never won a battle. Not here. Perhaps in Angola. But today, they carry guns to protect a leader. It's a spiritual matter for me. That's not true. The church was here. Dio Soga was here. The first presidents of the ANC were ministers. The Ethiopian movement in South Africa was a spiritual movement. Spirituality was there for the liberation of a black person. That's why we saw 1994. That's the reason why I probably maintain my baptism. Black consciousness and black theology collapse time. They collapse time, they collapse intentionally, so the spaces that are imposed on us. In other words, the imaginaries of Western categories collapse because they are tools of a revolution. They are tools of a revolution. So, for example, African people have their own understanding of time. Time is not only linear. That philosophically has been argued. Time must not be understood as progression. Modernity is presented as a progression from one point to the other, as if it were a straight line. Now, once you take these teachings of Christianity like that, you are going to look at death, and then you know that the next step is a resurrection, and you are going to be born. No. The African way of life is not like that. It's secular, so you may not know which one came first. If you push your luck, you can try. But if it is secular, then you may not know which one came first, death or life itself. If it's a secular understanding of time, and so on. So once you put a Christianity along the lines of progression, you are definitely going to think that the first step is to be born, and then the next step is to die. And of course, in Ekasi, you die in a shed because even hospitals are sick. If you are, and then you will die in a private hospital. And then the minister will pray for you in order for you to resurrect. I have a problem. Christianity itself is a product of the resurrection. The Gospels are written from the perspective of the resurrection first. So it means when you become a Christian, you resurrect. Now, that resurrection is black consciousness. That feeling of the death of consciousness is the starting point of Christianity in my view. And once you regain your consciousness, then you have resurrected. And if you are resurrected, you cannot avoid to be insurrectionist. Jesus Christ was an insurrectionist. You challenge the systems. That's where your spirituality comes from. So I think that's how I see it for now. But we've been taught to wait. We've been taught to wait in order for us to die, because we will go to another world. But Christianity, in fact, is a combination of all the aspects of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. You can look at those things with certain philosophical categories, but as I say, even the word itself, Anastasia, anyone who's Anastasia here, the word means rebellion.
If we do attain liberation, what will then happen? Are we going to still strive for more liberation, whereas we do have the liberation? Or is the liberation theology going to subside and we're going to start a new thing or a new movement or whatsoever? So my question is that what will happen now when we as black people have attained the land, have attained freedom, have attained wealth and so forth? So my question is, what will happen now if we reach those goals? Is it a means to an end, or is there something else when you have reached that stage?
The Bible, a sacred text designed to enslave black people, or is the Bible a sacred text designed to liberate black people? Can you comment on that so that I can understand your frame of reference? Because most of us, we use the Bible as the source of information and as a foundation on our approach to life. So please, can you assist in terms of the Bible itself? Thank you.
Yes, there are buffer zones everywhere. To sustain the problems we are dealing with, the structure of our oppression is that we create a buffer zone. The buffer zone is that before you even reach the core of the problem, you're going to fight with your own people. You're going to fight with your women. Women are going to say this again, you are not being behaving, and so forth. If you are a minister, you're going to fight with other ministers, that kind of thing. It's in the structure of our oppression. And if you are not aware of that, you may get ultimately defeated, because you will lose courage. So all I can say is that courage, we know that there will always be those who will, among us, make it difficult for us to achieve the goals of liberation. So we are aware of that. We get tired. There are times when you feel that let me rather go and stay in Constantia. It's better there. We get tired. We are all human beings, but we have got to know that there's that thick layer. And that layer today, for the past 23 years, has possibly been caused by our political leaders. So there was always a problem of self-inflicted pain in the struggle. That's why I spoke about humility. And that's why the struggle means spirituality. Because we were tired. Thanks, I'm not going to say anything more about that. You know, what happens when liberation is achieved? Okay, let me first say, is it not important to think about how we answer that question or how we ask it first? Because my preoccupation is the liberation at the moment. So we can dream about that possibility. Maybe we can talk about it once it is attained. And that question is very common. And that it was also used in post-1994 South Africa to say, now we are liberated. Let's stop talking about liberation theology. So it is a question that is not innocent in its origins. So I'm going to ask you that we focus on creating spaces in the township, Ekasi, and then we can answer that thereafter. However, I am not running away from your question. Remember that exactly what is happening today. The people who were on the other side of the struggle, who are in power today, are now the ones who are behaving sometimes worse than those we struggled against. So there's a possibility that there will be a liberation theology against such black demagogues if they think that liberation is the repetition of the oppression of others. That is not black consciousness. Yes, I have started something that I think perhaps we could probably think about, which is Vuyani Bantu. Collecting 50 rand a month from 320,000 people. They make 16 million a month. And then in a year, they make 192 million. They are just 320,000. And then they invest this, and they have been doing this. Now, if you look at what they are doing, the first thing they do, which is extremely important, is to maintain the privilege of a white person. Look at this. During Pristoria's case, I loved her. I loved I loved how I loved everything. I saw the defense. I saw the other one. And I remember at one stage, I was preaching in Soweto. I quoted Gerinel. Because Gerinel said, Gerinel said, look at what you have done. Look at what you have done. And then the legal system here was saying, no, you don't do that. You don't do that. And I said, but that's what the cross of Jesus demands us. Yeah. Every time we come into church, look at what happened to the body of Jesus. The moment you drop your head, that's when you will miss the mark. That's what Christianity is all about. Look at the morals that we have created. Now we are told, and sometimes in Reformed faith, we are probably even dangerous because we don't even see Jesus. With the cross is not something to decorate our chests. The cross is a terrible weapon of systems of power. The cross crucifies. The cross is violent. The cross labels. It is a form of punishment that is used to make others who see the victim to fear even to start. You know, that is the cross. Now, systems are created to maintain that. And we may critique one another. But AfriForum saw it long ago. Only 320 will invest for the future of their children. What are we doing? What are we doing? And I'm saying, Vuyani, let's do the same thing. Let's start something. Not for us, not for me, but for our children and the world. Because the future of the people of my age was destroyed more than 100 years ago. It was determined then. Because, you see, imperial power plans, and I can cite African women, friends, and so forth. They say the idea that is very important among African people is to plan. So some of the things that we see today are not, but effects of what was planned many years ago. And then we live our lives and we think that we are happy now. We must begin to invest, and then problems such as those that we have identified maybe might be dented by others. I am not trying to say I'm a messiah here. I'm realistic. But if 320,000 people can make 16 million a month, and in this township alone, how many people do we have even 10 rand can make it? In Soweto, even Botswana is not equal to the population of Soweto. But we are sitting and talking. That's why I started this project. And it is something that is still at its embryonic stage. I'm making people to talk about it. But if you really feel that there is something we need to do, 50 rand, let's invest it and see what we can do for the future of South Africa and for the future of Jesus. Yes, I love Jesus. Jesus makes me drunk. That's why I was baptized. You're correct. Baptism is a statement of democracy and liberation. And I will encourage black people, if you don't believe in Christ, believe in something, because spirituality requires to be nurtured. We can't just be black conscious and not have the spiritual resources on which we anchor our faith as black people. Otherwise, we are going to perish. The Bible has both the word about people and the word of God as a testimony of the liberation of people and God as a liberator. That's all. Without that, it doesn't make sense to me. Were you not asking philosophy?
You were being a prof now.
Yes, the Bible is the word of God. I believe that. The Bible is the word about God. In other words, It is about the stories that human beings tell in order for them to understand what God is saying. I do not distinguish the two. I distinguish the two, but I do not fragment one from the other. The Bible is like the stories we tell in the crawl. The stories that we tell in the crawl when we sing praises to our ancestors and so on. You will stand there as a human being, but you will pay libation and so on to narrate your history and so forth. You are doing your Bible at that time, but you also believe that what you are doing is going to evoke that which is more powerful than you can do as a human being. So it reveals, it makes the grasp of my understanding of humanity as something that is not in the hands of a human being important, but it is told by human beings. Strike the balance. No Bible will ever make me eat grass. No Bible will ever make me walk on top of a woman. No Bible will make me like they do in Uganda to get a woman into a pool and to have this woman lick my private part. That's not the Bible, but something else. So the balance between the two. And remember that it's true, it is other scholars, there are biblical scholars, remember in Theology, there are philosophers as well. And Gabriel's Vuyani argued many years ago that a biocentric view of African life suggests that we must not take the Bible as a starting point. And I agree with him. The knowledge of African people, indigenous peoples today, is the salvation of the entire earth, not only humanity. Because colonization has destroyed creation, not only human beings. Yeah, so how far you want to go is up to you. But for now, as long as it gives me inspiration for the liberation of humanity and creation, I think my ancestors will forgive me, they will accept me. I cannot go into things I cannot know too much. I have got to accept my limitation. And as I said to you, I think I can't be a liar. I was baptized. I got to deal with that reality. And so the Bible just went.
You have this black Jesus. This kind of but just to say this. So this was basically a space that we are wishing to create, whereby we talk about our experiences as black people and our faith as black people. And so it was organized by Ujama. Basically, we will never be able to do anything up until we do this as a first step, whereby we just gather ourselves and reflect on our wounds. We are wounded people as black people, and we need to not to overlook these wounds. In order for us to take care of these wounds, we need to look at them, reflect on them, meditate on them. I think part of the reason why we need to have the cross at our churches, it is basically to reflect on pain that was experienced by Jesus Christ. Christianity is meditation on pain, but why do black people always try to avoid their own pain? Why do black people always try to escape their own wounds? So as a starting point, we need to reflect on these wounds, and then we will only be able to have a space whereby we reimagine ourselves. So Ujama is a space where we try to
do that, whereby we try to reimagine ourselves. Because we believe that at the center of our oppression is the question of food. And you can see that even in the biblical text. Joseph used food to oppress people. When the Israelites were on their way, they reflected on food. What they remembered about Egypt was food. When Jesus prays, he brings food at the center still. Now, at the center of our oppression as black people today, there's the question of food. As a result, we even say that we go get away, you know, we go to bed for bread. Meaning our people wake up in the morning just to go at work so that they get enough money to buy enough food, so that they eat enough food, so that they have enough energy to go back to work again. If we don't see that as a problem, we are a problem ourselves. And so, it's a space where we try to reimagine ourselves. So those who are interested in having that, to continue that conversation, we have pamphlets there. Those who are interested in joining this movement. So part of the things that we do, plant food in public spaces, we are interested in community bakeries, whereby we produce our own bread. I mean, bread is about to be 15 rands now. If we are not worried about that, I don't know what else will worry us. The fact that ShopRite is feeding us with poison, and we are not worried about that, we are in problem. And also, Prof. on Vuyani, and we have that in our folder somewhere. We can email that to everyone who's interested. And I think we need to be part of that as a way to build ourselves. Because we have been talking, we're not doing anything. And we need to be honest about that. It's about time now what we start to do, regardless of how many we are, those who are interested in this particular vision of the liberation of humanity. Because at the center of liberation of humanity is the liberation of black people.